welcome to episode 63 of Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show about the ideas, people, and projects building the digital economy and the future of money. Visit us at letstalkbitcoin.com for our daily guest blog, all our past episodes, and of course, tipping addresses. My name is Adam B. Levine, and this show is about deep conversations. I'm joined by Jeffrey Tucker to talk about the future of cryptocurrency, the irony of Bitcoin's biggest detractors, and as always, much, much more. Then, ever want to know how a Bitcoin millionaire thinks? David Menez joins Let's Talk Bitcoin for the first time to perform Beggars Can Be Choosers by the Bitcoin Monger for a peek into one such individual's mindset. And finally, with the Bitcoin difficulty skyrocketing, but not as much as the price, Stephanie catches up with Joe, a newly minted ASIC miner with a lot to say about rolling the dice on buying equipment and just how important the price really is. It's a long one today, so we'll get right into it. Enjoy the show. Jeffrey Tucker is a gentleman and a scholar, the current editor of Laissez-Faire Books and my favorite bow tie aficionado. He joins us to talk, well, Bitcoin. Jeffrey, how are you?
Everything's going great.
That's good. You have no idea what I'm going to talk to you about here because I've kept it a secret. I'm pretty excited to talk to you about this because I think that, Jeffrey, we've actually found the future of Bitcoin and nobody knows about it yet.
Was it discussed at the cryptocurrency conference?
It was not. I mean, it was kind of, but I think that now we've seen the first examples of it and it's really interesting. So Bitcoin, right? Neutral, stateless, cheap, fast money. The same could also be said, though, about Litecoin or Feathercoin, who make tweaks to Bitcoin, but ultimately whose value is only really as good as how desirable they are to trade. This is also true of even more innovative or unusual coins like Frycoin, which introduces demurrage features and makes it so that your money loses purchasing power over time to encourage spending, or proof-of-stake-based coins, which kind of do the opposite, and the more coins you hold, the more coins that you're able to mine because the mining comes from your investment into the coins that you already have. The only commonality that these things do have is that the only thing that they're good for is as money. And that's sort of a funny thing to say because we think that money emerges from commodities and that money emerges from other things that are already useful. But what if useful things could emerge from money that we already have that's already good money? Right? So what if cryptocurrency wasn't restricted to being only good money? And what if instead of the value being determined by the power of the network, it's determined by what you actually get for holding the cryptocurrency at distinct points in the future? The idea at this core is the idea that cryptocurrencies can be backed by private companies. Let me give you an example here for a second. So we're going to do a timber harvest on the hillside that I live on, and it is going to take out some wood for fire danger, basically. This process is going to generate enough wood to create about 100,000 cutting boards, right, made from rare wood that comes off of our property. We know that this is a process that's going to take between 3 and 5 years. So if we were to take those estimated production runs and then figure out what our costs are, what our spin-up time is, and then create, say, Woodcoin or something like that starts off with a period of time initially where anybody can mine them to initially accumulate them, and then we'll also be mining them, as with everybody else. And then after a 3-month period of time or a 6-month period of time while we're doing the initial financing and figuring out how to make it all work, then there's an initial release period where the thing comes out and we offer to redeem it at, say, 100 wood coins per cutting board. And we project out into the future, say, okay, for the next 3 years, every 6 months, the value at which we ascribe to wood coins relative to the thing that we're backing it with, these cutting boards, will increase in value by, say, 10%. So you can instill deflationary trends into cryptocurrencies by having a private company voluntarily commit, essentially making a social contract to honor it. And if that social contract is believed to be that it will be honored, then the value of it in the market should increase, right?
Yeah, maybe so.
We saw the first example of this. What I just gave you was a totally speculative example that deals with physical product and all that jazz. What we've seen in the last couple of months has been the release of the ProtoShares protocol, which had a very kind of difficult time, but that is the first real example of this almost like IPO coin, is the original name that I believe Charles Hoskinson gave to it, this concept, right? Because what happens with ProtoShares is that if you are holding ProtoShares at the point that the company that backs it, Invictus Innovations, releases their next product, which is also a blockchain product, also a new type of cryptocurrency, then it will be forked from ProtoShares. So instead of holding proto shares because you expect someone to want to give you more money for them later, you're holding proto shares because at distinct points in time, you will get double, however many proto shares you hold, you'll get whatever it is that Invictus just released on a one-to-one basis.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's a very different way of thinking about cryptocurrency, because with cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Litecoin, it really is all about the network, and to a large degree about fairness too. If it's perceived that things happen in an unfair fashion with a currency that's supposed to be completely neutral, then that's a very bad thing for the currency. But if it happens with something that's backed by a private company, I don't know if that's necessarily the case anymore, because really the only factor in determining value is, will the company deliver on their promise? And again, this is something that's being pioneered by Invictus, but I really see the future of this as you could have any company do this with any product. And it works even better if you have something like software as a service, like Dropbox, for example, could create a coin that circulates and they would accept it as payment and they wouldn't even lose any money because they sell it back onto the market at whatever the market rate is. And the market rate in a free market should reflect whatever discount they're giving it for.
Yeah, how would you compare that to what like Amazon's doing with Amazon coins?
Well, the thing about Amazon coins is that there's no interchange, right? Each one is a walled garden, right? What Amazon has done is they've created a little internal system, very similar actually to Gift. GYFT.com is a gift card company that's now offering points back for buying gift cards with them. And it's 1% back of the value if you spend with a credit card, 2% back if you spend with PayPal, and 3% back if you spend with Bitcoin. So the only difference between this and that is that in a situation where it's a cryptocurrency, first off, people don't earn them initially by buying them. They earn them initially by mining them. So they have a financial incentive because they got something at what they perceive to be a lower cost. It might have been a higher cost because of electricity, but most people don't really think about it like that. Running your computer is just sort of an expected cost in this day and age, it seems like. But that really is the difference, is what it allows you to do is it allows you to take all of these little systems that are their own little pawns and connect the liquidity between them. So in this case, right now, if I have points in Gift and I want to spend points at Amazon, I can't do that. But if both of these were running on cryptocurrencies, then Bitcoin would be the common thread that ties them all together. Bitcoin is essentially the highway, and each of these little private altcoins is like an off-ramp. And sometimes there are big developments at the off-ramp, and sometimes it's just, it's a couple of tumbleweeds and there's nothing really there. But the point is that each one is connected to every other off-ramp through the highway that is Bitcoin.
Right. How does this compare to something like what Ripple is considering? Have you looked carefully into that?
So Ripple is like an infrastructure for running debt of other currencies on top of it. So when you send Bitcoin over the Ripple network, you're not really sending Bitcoin. You're sending an IOU that's going to be redeemed at the other end. And that's why they have instant confirmations and stuff like that. So Ripple, at its kind of base level, from my perspective, is more about like providing really fast liquidity, right? It's about liquidity between players who need a lot of liquidity, and then they even up at some point.
It's not that different from, it's like a third-party payment system for cryptocurrencies and other currencies.
And they're not the only ones doing it, too, is the other thing that's really interesting. In a year, it's going to still feel futuristic, I think, because the ways that it was built, they skipped a lot of steps. There's another project in the space called Mastercoin, who I've also been doing interviews with, that's kind of trying to do the same thing. Jeffrey, at their core, these are all attempts to take the Bitcoin currency system and turn it into something that's more. We've seen this attempt before with colored coins, and they haven't really caught a lot of traction. But the idea is to ascribe smart property and the ownership of property onto actual currency or onto actual coins. Once you've got that infrastructure in place, then creating a new one for a new company is just as simple as saying, okay, well, here's a new one. Here's the information that you need to fill out. Here's the pitch you need to make. Here's the guarantee you need to do. And, go for it. You can do it. On the one hand, you could look at it almost like a marketing expense, right? Because it's as if you're putting coupons out there in the newspaper because, again, it doesn't cost the person anything except the work it takes to cut them out and bring it in and get to the store and all that jazz. But at the point that you do, you can actually sell the coupons back into the market. So, the idea that's most interesting to me about this is the thought that the fundamentals of these cryptocurrencies can be based on things that are other than monetary fundamentals. Because to this point, I really had been thinking about cryptocurrency as a great solution to fix the currency problem. And that was about it. And now I'm starting to think maybe this really is a solution that fixes everything.
The experimentation here is absolutely essential. And I think you make a compelling point, and it's very possible. It's hard for me to say that, well, this is definitely the future. But what's important is that cryptocurrency has sort of pioneered the possibility of entrepreneurship in this realm. And I'm fully prepared to be blown away and totally surprised by developments in the future. And I don't see how anybody can say in advance for sure what's going to be what. I think we should have learned from Bitcoin in particular here, not that everybody has or we're anywhere near this, that essentially we've lived in a market that's been devoid of entrepreneurship for like 100 years. So, and it's only now being unleashed. So it would be a little bit crazy to expect that we know what the stable solution is, that Bitcoin is going to replace the dollar and that'll be the end of history. I mean, there'll be many other solutions, among which things like third-party providers and debt-based contracts and company-based currencies, new forms of liquidity between companies and consumers. And we're seeing a gradual evolution take place that went from a very primitive form of third-party payment systems that were developed in the 1950s. Now they're getting ever more sophisticated. I was at an Indian website a few days ago that had fully something like 30 or 40 different payment options, among which was Bitcoin. Yeah, so we're going to see, ever more of these things. The point is that the sanctions system of the past, that was basically a creation of the state with a handful of private companies, has now been exploded into a new digital realm where there's communication across borders, where there's new forms of organizing and association on a financial basis between companies all over the world and consumers all over the world. So I think we're just at the cusp of seeing what kind of innovations are going to be possible, all of which are ultimately anti-monopolistic. In other words, the current monopoly system that sort of dominates the world can't possibly survive this level of pressure.
It's been fascinating watching the price go up over the last couple of weeks, with the pressure coming from China. It seems like, from what I can tell, it feels like they're about a year and a half, maybe 2 years behind where we are here in the Western world as far as the general tone of the conversation that's going on there. And they just happen to have a lot more people who are interested in it right now. I've been trying to wrestle with the implications of what if $800 or $1,000 or whatever level we wind up settling at, what if this is the new normal? Because on the one hand, that's crazy. And on the other hand, we already saw it happen once. Already saw the new normal go from being under $1 to over $100. And I mean, if that's true, then that means that if this is the new normal, then there's going to be another new normal at some point in the future that'll be even higher than this.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I was just looking at the charts this morning, and I had these flashbacks to the harrowing days of, I think it was in April of this year, which seems like 20 years ago. But I had only recently gotten interested in Bitcoin, and it was just like right as I was kind of getting really interested. And I think I was interested in it when it was $25 maybe, and then it reached up to 30, and everybody was screaming, "This is a bubble!" Right? Well, I was writing about it pretty intensely, and in a handful of weeks, in just a few short weeks, we went from that straight up to 260, and of course, the skeptics were saying, well, this is unsustainable, and indeed it proved not to be sustainable, and we fell back to $80. And so everybody was saying, but Bitcoin is dead. I mean, there were lots of publications that declared this, which amused me at the time because, a fall from 260 back down to 80 still would have put it in double the territory where everybody had previously been claiming there was a bubble. But you're right. People adapt to the price change, and they assume that's the new normal. So it fell down to 80. People were saying, oh, see, look, Bitcoin's dead. It's crashed. Well, we looked from the point of view of the first of the year, just 3 months earlier, Bitcoin was $14. So anyway, the point of the chart that I was looking at this morning, and you look at the current run-up, and I think there was a high hit just this morning, really. That little rise and fall this past April looks like just completely growing pains and not anything really notable at all.
Right.
I mean, it vanishes when you compare to the whole sweep of what's happened. I mean, already today, everybody's saying it's in the bubble and, it's going to crash and people better get out. And, that may be true. There's no way to know for sure, but it's also equally possible that people will be kicking themselves for not having bought at $800.
It's just this, what is normal and how fast can you acclimate to something being normal? And is it really normal? I mean, that's, of course, the other thing is that one of the things I think that's really been helpful for us actually has been that common plaintive cry, oh, well, this is the end of Bitcoin. Because every time they're wrong about it being the end of Bitcoin, people are like, okay, well, that didn't happen again. I guess they're just wrong. I mean, like the boy who cries wolf thing kicks in after a certain point.
Well, I just this morning listened to this long debate I'm not sure I would call it a debate. It was just kind of a back and forth between Stefan Molyneux and Peter Schiff. And one thing I noticed about Schiff in particular and his objections to Bitcoin is that they were sort of all over the map. Like he would barely finish with one objection when, Molyneux would address it, and then he would generate a new one. Somebody should chart this out and probably come up with 35 different problems he mentioned with Bitcoin, and none of which were like a decisive problem at all. I mean, there wasn't a single point that he could really hold on to and argue consistently throughout the entire debate because every point was just a little too weak. So, He had to kind of keep moving on and moving on and moving on.
This holiday season, you could shop with a credit card and maybe earn 1% back. Or you could shop smart and get 3% back with Gift. On Gift, you can get gift cards with Bitcoin. Choose from over 200 retailers, including Target, GameStop, Gap, and more. Gift makes it easy to shop on Android or on the web. There are no additional fees. And when you shop with Bitcoin, you get 3% back. Go ahead, try Gift. That's GYFT.com.
Happy holidays from Let's Talk Bitcoin. If you like the work we're doing, we appreciate Bitcoin tips of all sizes at letstalkbitcoin.com. Just as importantly, share the show with your peers and review the show on iTunes. Don't be kind, be honest. LTB reaches nearly 10,000 listeners, but has less than 50 reviews anywhere I can find. I'd very much appreciate your help in remedying this situation. Thanks for listening. Besides Peter Schiff, who do you think are the real critics out there being vocal about Bitcoin at this point?
Well, the whole hard money crowd has been strangely out there in opposition to Bitcoin. And it's funny to say, in opposition to, because, of course, it doesn't matter how much you like it or don't like it. Bitcoin's going to do whatever it wants to do. So it's a little strange. The other thing that's a little odd about the hard money crowd is they keep comparing Bitcoin to gold. And I don't know what relevance that has at all. Gold is just gold. It's not money. It's just gold. It hasn't been anything like money on the international level for some 40 years. And it's been 80 years since you could convert any dollars into gold at the domestic level. In other words, this is all basically ancient history. I mean, we're talking about lifetimes ago. And there's absolutely no chance that, unless you're just completely full of political fantasy, that governments of the world are going to somehow see to it to change their currencies from fiat back into gold in order to establish sound money. I mean, that's not going to happen. So why does everybody keep comparing it to gold? Well, not only that, but it's a terrible comparison. I mean, gold is just not portable in the same way that cryptocurrency is. It's just not the thing for the internet age.
One of the big problems that comes up over and over again is always this assumption that the price, even if the price is really high right now, if you actually tried to sell a bunch at this price, well, that'd be a completely different matter. And of course, the implied assumption there is that in order to capture the value and spend, the earnings that you have accumulated through speculating on Bitcoin, you have to convert it into some other type of currency in order to spend it. And I mean, I think that that's really the fundamental problem that I see more often than not, is people just not appreciating that. It's like saying to someone, I'll pay you in a second, I have to go sell my cash real quick. The nomenclature just doesn't work.
Yeah, you mean that the problem with Bitcoin is in order to realize your gains, you have to leave that ecosphere and enter into a government fiat currency?
I think that's one of the common assumptions from people who don't actually do trade with Bitcoin. I don't know about you. I mean, I don't actually know how you use Bitcoin at all besides the very basics. I very, very rarely convert into dollars when I'm going to spend Bitcoin. Most of the time, I'm spending Bitcoin as Bitcoin. And sometimes it's through a service that does conversion themselves. But as a consumer, I don't care about that. I just care that I'm able to capture the high value that I think I should be getting for it.
Well, and I'll tell you another objection I've heard recently. It was in an audience I was speaking, the other day. I think it was in Austin, Texas, and then I read it again online somewhere. People say that the value of Bitcoin is entirely supported by its convertibility to the dollar, and if it weren't for that, then Bitcoin would not have any value at all. To me, this is looking at everything completely upside down. The point is the value of Bitcoin comes from its convertibility into any goods and services, and one of those goods is government paper money. So it's not somehow that it's dependent on the conversion into dollars as such. And people quickly retort, oh, no, if you're going to acquire Bitcoin, you have to buy them with dollars. Actually, that's not true. You can acquire Bitcoin with services that you render or some of the goods that you sell. You can sell anything for Bitcoin or perform any service for Bitcoin. You can bypass the dollar economy entirely and live within Bitcoin ecosphere, coming and going, really. So this completely misses the point. I think a lot of the problems and the misunderstandings here, conceptual difficulties people have here, is that they don't understand what it means for something to be an open source protocol living on a distributed network. That's too big an abstraction. People tend to think of Bitcoin as being a product being offered by a company in the same way that a gold mining company might offer stocks or something like that, or like a stock to Amazon or something. They don't have a conception of Bitcoin as being an open source protocol that more or less belongs to everybody that lives on distributed networks. That is, it's not a proprietary company. It's not an investment scheme. It's just it's a tool that takes advantage of cryptography and peer-to-peer networks and distributed networks and open source development models of software to achieve a kind of an ideal monetary situation, ideal for now anyway. That's just really difficult for people to, if you haven't been keeping up for the last 20 years and the changes and the way the world works and the way software works, then you're just going to have a hard time understanding that. The other thing I've noticed about Bitcoin is that it's very difficult. One of the things you'll find with all the opponents, the people that are speaking out against it all the time, it's difficult for them to admit what they don't know. I tweeted out yesterday, show me a person who is opposed to Bitcoin, and you'll see a person who believes that he or she knows everything there is to know about it. But in fact, if you find a real expert on Bitcoin, you hear a real curiosity and a willingness to learn and watch the markets and follow the markets and be a little bit humble in the face of these amazing developments. So there's some principle that governs this, but the expertise, like ultimate final expertise in Bitcoin, seems to be limited to those people who are dogmatically opposed to it just because they think they know things they don't know. Let me just bring up, too, a fascinating, persistent complaint that keeps going on. Just because I was interviewed about this from Wired magazine the other day, for some reason Wired seems to have some editorial doubts about Bitcoin. I guess they've been expressed in a number of articles. And they think that they seized on one the other day and they noticed that it was deflationary. You brought this up at the beginning of this talk, it's deflationary. And you can't have a money supply system that's deflationary. This is the ultimate nightmare in a way. And it's funny because, I address this on two levels. One is that the reason people are opposed to a deflationary monetary system is they think that that's a sort of a velocity killer, that as something is growing in value, people hold on to it, and that's not what you're supposed to do with money. You're supposed to spend money, not supposed to just hoard it, and that hoarding will cause liquidity traps, for example, in old-fashioned Keynesian terms. So the first level of critique of that is to just observe empirically that, yes, theoretically, it would seem that people would be holding on to coins more if they're growing in value, just because if you spend them now, you're sort of giving up profits you could realize later. The thing that you notice from talking to any of the companies that specialize in providing widgets online for spending Bitcoins is that they boom in value when the price in terms of dollars is going up. In other words, when Bitcoin is becoming more valuable, they see the pace of spending dramatically increase, not decrease. So we're actually seeing empirically the reverse of what theory would predict. So that's just a fact, and I'm just laying it out there. And I just explained it just because, as I told the guy at Wired, the purpose of currency isn't just to hoard it forever. That's just kind of dumb. The whole purpose of currency is precisely to spend it. And then people need stuff and they want stuff, and so they spend it. And it's just simple as that. The pace of which it's spent could go up and down depending on conditions. But essentially, you just think of it intuitively. A person's, bought Bitcoin at $8 and it's suddenly $800. They're like, I'm going to use this stuff now.
Right.
So there's that. And the second thing to observe about this whole deflationary fear is that it's fundamentally based on nothing whatsoever. It's one of those kinds of fears that result from macroeconomic textbooks in which monetary economists lay out what they consider to be the ideal monetary system, but It's not actually based on any kind of fact. There are sectors of economic life that have been living in a state of deflation for 20 or 30 years. The most obvious example is computers and software that have been falling in price for a very long time. Or another way to put it is that the value of the dollar has grown in terms of software for 30 years now. And even some sectors of the clothing industry is the same way, and other things. Then it hasn't actually harmed business. It hasn't led to liquidity traps and disasters for company profitability. And if you go back further in time, you can look at the late 19th century when we actually did go on a government gold standard following the Civil War. We saw a continuous appreciation of the money in terms of goods and services all the way up until essentially until World War I. And it was also happened to be the highest growth period ever in American history. We were seeing 8, 9, 10% per annum economic growth. So there's really no evidence that somehow a currency that's rising in value is somehow harmful for economic growth. I think it's just a fallacy. We're not used to it. We're not used to the fact that we can get money, hold it, and then convert it later and get more for our money than we had before. We've lived through a century of inflation, so we just don't think that's supposed to happen somehow. But it probably in a free market, it is supposed to happen. My final point on this is that, look, Satoshi Nakamoto came up with this protocol. He threw it out there. If somebody doesn't like the fact that it's a deflationary currency, then switch to something else. If you don't like it, don't use it. But ultimately, there's got to be some relationship between what people desire in a microeconomic sense and what's desirable in a macroeconomic sense.
The differentiating between the micro and the macro, I think that is 100% the disconnect on this particular issue. I've been thinking about this a lot because you're right, it's a huge issue. And people don't understand, they just assume that this hoarding thing is going to happen. From my experience personally, not just with regards to Bitcoin, but just broadly speaking, I've had a variety of incomes over my life. And the times when I've spent a lot of money are times when I felt like I was really comfortable and like I could comfortably spend a lot of money without endangering, my lifestyle at that current point. And the times when I haven't spent a lot of money is when I don't have any money to spend and I don't feel like it's a responsible decision for me to do that. So with Bitcoin, it's like, the more the price goes up, the more I feel like I have the ability to spend it because I get to spend less. That's been true for a lot of people that I know. And I know that there certainly are some people who have their Bitcoins on a flash drive stuck in a safety deposit box in 3 different banks all over the country, and they never plan to touch it for 10 years. But I don't think that that's the majority of people because it doesn't make sense.
I think you're right to sort of rely on these intuitions. One of the things you notice about this form of economics that's been conventionally taught at the academic level since about the 1940s is that there's this great disconnect between what's good for the individual and what's good for society. So, we're always hearing about liquidity traps, for example, or the paradox of savings, so-called.
A liquidity trap in the context of the Keynesian argument that you're talking about here would be where everybody holds on to their dollars and saves them, and because of that, there are very few dollars going around through the economy, and so there isn't enough liquidity, and so loans are required, but they're hard to get because nobody wants to lend, right?
Right. So the idea is that you might think it's good for you to hold money, but actually it's bad for you because the economy as a whole needs money sort of circulating around in order to kickstart it, get things to provide the grease. There's all these weird metaphors that people use, about grease and machines and all this stuff.
Right.
And then this speaks to the so-called paradox of saving. That you might think it's a good thing to save money. Actually, it's a terrible thing to save money, according to the Keynesian view. And you hear presidents talk about this all the time. Like I remember after 9/11, George Bush was going around saying, we can defeat terrorism by going out and buying something. Right. Well, a lot of people had I think a very justified sense that maybe going into debt and squandering a bunch of money at a time of great uncertainty is probably not a good idea. So the paradox of savings tries to tell people to do things that are against their own self-interest. So I think that, anytime you hear an economic theory that seems to drive a wedge between what's good for you and what's good for everybody else, you're good for society, that should be the first tip-off that there's something funny going on here. And so a lot of the fear of deflation really comes down to that. The Chicago Fed paper, also, we should say something about that. That came out, about 3-4 weeks ago. It was a big blast against Bitcoin. And I wrote an article about it because I thought it was just hilarious. They were saying that Bitcoin was a sort of a secretive, confused, highly complex currency that was controlled by a handful of developers operating in secret. And, as I read that sentence, I thought, my God, that sounds like a perfect description of the Federal Reserve, actually.
That does seem to be more and more true. Is whatever they're saying, probably they're the ones doing it.
It seemed like a massive sort of active Freudian projection of some sort. That entire paper was very strange.
So while we're on the subject of central banks, the Central Bank of China, one of the governors of that, recently released a kind of cautiously optimistic statement about Bitcoin. And again, it seems like this movement up in price has been largely driven by the seeming okayness of the Chinese Communist Party with their people converting yuan into Bitcoin. That seems like it's a real dangerous place if that's what the price of Bitcoin is relying on right now.
Yeah, if that's true. I don't know to what extent that's empirically verified.
Well, BTC China has seen prices converted to U.S. dollars. They only trade yuan and Bitcoin. But converted to U.S. dollars, they've seen prices over $1,100. So most of the market right now, most of the exchanges that are seeing their price spike up are happening through arbitrage trades that are going essentially from the U.S. exchanges that have the lower price, but that you can't purchase in yuan, and then being arbitraged over to the BTC China, where they can achieve a 25% increase.
I gather that China has some pretty severe exchange controls, and Bitcoin is just to escape from that, right? At least that's what people tell me.
Right. I mean, that's been my impression as well. It's hard to get good information out of China, it seems like. But again, like the number of people who could give you good information about what like the government is going to do. But it seems like in the U.S., there's been a harder line stance where the impression has been that something, they would do something about it, but maybe they actually won't do something about it. But in China, the impression has been they're okay with it because these things have made their way onto state television. And there have been a variety of documentaries essentially encouraging people to look at this currency. And I mean, again, I don't think it's possible to enforce currency controls once you've stepped away from controllable currency like the yuan and moved into something like Bitcoin.
Well, you got to figure, too, that, China's the ultimate situation where we have vast amount of crufty laws. There's tons of things on the books that exist that are not really well enforced, that party officials themselves regret, but they have no power to change them. One of the things we haven't really talked about is that government is a kind of a big industry all over the world, and government officials themselves, I would like to imagine that they're all squeaky clean and wonderful and not accepting bribes and doing graft and stuff like that. But the fact is that the real business of government is, has an underground economy just as much as anywhere else does. So government officials need a way to accumulate wealth outside the purview of their colleagues, and they need a way to receive bribes just to make things work right. So, in the past, you could rely to some extent on Swiss banking and that sort of thing, but, that's less and less viable now. So I'm very interested in this idea that maybe governments around the world, individual members of cabinets, of staffs, of old-line bureaucracies, will discover Bitcoin as a viable way to do business for themselves and be less likely to crack down on the private sector just because they see so many personal advantages to it. Otherwise, it's really difficult to explain how it is that China just had this laissez-faire attitude, unless that laissez-faire attitude has just become pervasive within the policy culture of the Chinese government. I just don't know.
Or it's worth poking the U.S. dollar in the eye more than they care about preserving their own capital controls for the minority of people who are going to take advantage of this. I don't really know what the answer is, but that definitely seems like it's one of the important questions that's going to have to develop over 2014. Jeffrey, our time always goes by too fast. I look forward to continuing this conversation. Before we end it, are there any projects that you're working on right now that are new that you want to talk about, or anything that you want to come up?
Well, I mean, I'm working almost full time now on developing this digital city called Liberty Me. It's the idea is to create an ultimate global communication network for liberty-minded people to talk about things like cryptocurrency and get good solid information through information sharing. There's no platform like that out there right now, so I'm working on, I've got the best developers I know and the best technicians I know, and using every tool that I've got and trying to put together this massive platform for this purpose, which will be a publishing platform and social network, and will also be, of course, accepting Bitcoin at it. So it's going to be very edgy and very advanced. We're talking about something like a February 15th release, and so we hope that goes well and we dazzle the world with the thing.
Jeffrey Tucker, liberty.me. Thank you very much for your time.
That's right.
Beggars Can Be Choosers by the Bitcoin Monger of bitcoinmonger.tumblr.com. Performed by David Menace. Who am I? What do I believe? These do not matter. I know what question you have, and the answer is 1,240.2 Bitcoins. I can't promise to update this regularly or at all after this one, but here's me thoughts on the ride so far and guesses on the future. Baby, aren't you into that? Unlike some of the other early ones, I fortunately do not have a wife. What I have is a long-term girlfriend and under no legal obligation to spend any of my hoard to impress her dumb friends. Got in early after talking about it for a week or so with her and never mentioned it again. Treat it as if it doesn't exist, check back in a year, was my thinking. She saw something about Bitcoin in USA Today, and from there it's been a Gestapo reenactment in our apartment. Baby, how many did you buy? Did you keep them? Very few people know about my Bitcoin interest. I told her at that point not to tell her parents, not to tell her friends, no more than you would tell acquaintances you have $1 million in a duffel bag under the sofa. I explained that we need to continue to play the game of appearing middle class for the next year or two. We're like spies, I told her, trying to frame this in a playful way. So far, she's been good, to be honest. A relationship, no matter how great, won't stand between me and discarding the middle class like a hermit crab's abandoning shell when the moment comes. If my hardline stance on not selling too early ruins our relationship, that's fine. Then my potential access to other great women becomes X-1, whereas before it was X. That's still a lot of women. Where it will go. I'm staying in for the same reasons I got in. If you've ever spent more money than you should on something that gives you pleasure, a weekend fishing trip in Wyoming, front row seats at Cirque du Soleil, whatever, you already understand this. I got in when I did with a bit more than I was comfortable with because of the very idea of Bitcoin brought me pleasure. A world where the Visa and MasterCard logo are forced to share space with Bitcoin accepted here. A world where bankers go to sleep at night stressed and watching their dwindling assets on the screen is a world where the rest of us can sleep well. Do I pity people who didn't get in early? Not at all. I'm the guy who bought concert tickets 6 months out, got front row for a steal, and you're the guy who bought it a month out, paid more for seats. But you're still at the concert, and that's what matters. That puts you way ahead of the people who didn't buy tickets at all, who watched it on a shaky YouTube video the next day. They'll be comfortably upper middle class, freed from the treadmill. I'll be in La La Land. Some people can't see. Bitcoin didn't go up 4,100% in a year because of hype. Believe me, there are many who want to discredit Bitcoin and watch the whole thing tumble down. They just don't know how. You can't destroy the pious, and Bitcoin is the single most pious financial instrument humans have cooked up since the cuneiform ledger books of ancient Mesopotamia. It's going up because our world is changing. The Chinese have stopped hoarding US dollars, a shocking change in policy that many of my fellow USAers are sadly unaware of. We chant, USA! USA! Until our vocal cords fry. But that won't make our economic privilege come back from the dead. The world is moving on without us. Go buy Mad Men on DVD because that's the closest thing you'll come to seeing another American golden age. But that's okay. We're still good people. We still own one of the most productive swaths of land on the planet. We'll do okay. But those who understand the shifts happening will do better than okay. Life-changing has been misused by late-night infomercials so many times that when something actually is life-changing, the sheep turn the other way and continue to munch on their delicious, predictable grass. Polling. There's a coffee shop barista I go to often who looks like one of those hipsters you've seen in iPhone commercials. She's supposed to know all about the new trends, but when I asked her if the shop has considered taking Bitcoin, I had to explain to her what a Bitcoin was. You've never heard of it? Really? I asked her, delighted. This is good news for the slightly less early adopters in my mind. That conversation sparked my curiosity, and I spent an afternoon at the mall asking cashiers and clerks if they knew what Bitcoin was. The only person who knew anything was a young Asian dude selling tobacco vape pipes at a kiosk. Lottery logic. My background is in maths and finance, so apologies in advance for blatantly appealing to your base emotional instinct. I'm going to do so anyways. Consider a lottery ticket. You're not going to win. You know you're not going to win, but you play anyways. Bitcoin is a lottery ticket you could actually win. Even if Bitcoin becomes more popular than Discover Card, which apparently still exists, it will make all of us more than satisfied. Bitcoin beggars. I'm seeing more and more of these types on discussion boards that talk Bitcoin, and although at first it annoyed me, desperation is annoying, isn't it? If Bitcoin weren't perceived as valuable, people wouldn't be so swiftly giving up their social value and dignity in exchange for 0.5 Bitcoins. The more beggars, the more confirmation that Bitcoin is money. And I sometimes give, sending someone an unexpected tip for a job well done, a good ebook on Bitcoin wallet security, for example, or buying something from a small business that just started accepting Bitcoin is part of the responsibility that us early adopters must take on. What would Bruce Wayne do? Probably sit in his mansion for a year, hobble around in his cane, and put his paper wallet in a vault. Bad example. In all seriousness, though, there is a responsibility. The biggest threat to Bitcoin is that people won't actually use it. Have to give it a little to get a lot in return. And sometimes that little tip or buying that florist arrangement with your Bitcoin is the spark that converts them. You see something in their eye. They're a part of the club now, enlightened, and they will spread the gospel to other shopkeepers. As a friend put it, you'll never go broke by giving to people. That's completely true. You only go broke when you selfishly try to make too much, too quickly, with too little research or effort. I must admit, I did sell one Bitcoin in a moment of weakness. I wanted money for a new laptop. The price went up significantly just after that, as if a sign from the gods. Selling that one Bitcoin still f***ing stings. I'm not kidding. By the seeding I've done hasn't hurt at all. It feels good. Johnny Appleseed. If it fails. If all goes to hell, my hoard becomes worth nothing. I've been given the gift of an exciting internal life in the past few months. I won't regret any of this, and reality sometimes, not always, rewards bravery. My ideology is the same. My belief in a new, more fair world is the same. Bitcoin is fair. Won't get into the technical details as you probably already know them, but no bank offers you its equivalent of a blockchain to review at any time. And no major currency today is as supply-demand market base as Bitcoin. There's no wizard behind the curtain. There's just you and me hoping for a better future. 1 year from today, I'm either back to where I was before this shared hallucination, which is completely okay, or I'm in a suite at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City for a 3-day weekend, treating my girlfriend to a bottle of champagne and giving her a white gold necklace from Bergdorf's. Then going to dinner at the steakhouse nearby my father took me to after I graduated college. I have this image very clearly held in my mind. I don't know you, but I do wish you well. Rather than recommend anything technical, wallets, websites, etc., I want to ask you to watch There Will Be Blood on Netflix if you haven't seen it yet. Fantastic acting. The point where he strikes silver then falls down the well, that's where I feel Bitcoin is at right now. We haven't struck the real oil yet.
So I'm here today talking with Joe from Virginia. Joe is a miner, a Bitcoin miner, that is. I think it's really interesting to get the perspective of different people who are just involved with Bitcoin in various ways, including by mining. Joe, welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin, first of all.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie.
I first met you when you contacted me through the show, and you said that you were thinking about getting some Bitcoin mining hardware from KNC Miner, which is, well, actually right now it's the only company that has shipped certain devices. I think it's the 24 or 28 nanometer ASICs with those kind of specs. And they've got the fastest hardware out there right now. But you didn't know that back in June when you first emailed me and you said, "Hey, Stephanie, what do you think about this? Do you think this is going to be worthwhile to get this hardware?" Because, of course, at that time it was on pre-order. And also at the time, the price of Bitcoin was around $100 per Bitcoin. So I wrote back and I said, well, you know, it's your call, of course, but if you have the ability to do it, if you've got a credit card that has no interest for a year or something like that, it probably makes sense. It looks like KNC Miner is serious and they're going to ship. Of course, that turned out to actually come true. So I was glad for that.
I just needed some community confirmation. The mining experience has been interesting. I'm by no means a coder, an expert. I'm just a regular guy who just got interested in Bitcoin and just threw my head into this and took a risk, and it seemed to pay off. Although in hindsight, I probably should have just bought the Bitcoin. But who knows? What's going to happen or what did happen? Hindsight is 2020. They're making nice heaters right now because my house is really cold, so I don't have to use the heat.
Yeah, that was the great thing about KNC shipping in November is they have just in time for the winter.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's back up a little bit. So you said, I mentioned that you emailed me and asked sort of an opinion about getting these mining equipment. So it sounded like you had kind of already made up your mind that you wanted to get this equipment. You just kind of wanted some validation or confirmation. Tell me about your decision process. What were you thinking in June about whether I should buy this equipment?
It was a huge speculation. At the time in June, I think Bitcoin was around 100, and it had just gone up, of course. And, I was thinking, it's probably going to stay 100. And if difficulty remains approximately the same, probably make a lot of money. But, and then as time went on, in August, September, I got pretty nervous, difficulty going up. And then October rolled around and difficulties going up. And
yeah, and Bitcoin price was staying the same, right? Because those are kind of the two wild cards, right? The difficulty of the Bitcoin network, so that is how many Bitcoins can you mine with a certain amount of hashing power, and then also what is the price of each Bitcoin, and that matters if you're not going to hold on to them necessarily, but you're going to use the Bitcoins that you mine to pay off your investment in the mining software.
Exactly.
Did you actually crunch numbers and do calculations, or did you kind of just give a ballpark estimate?
I used a few mining calculators online. So there's a few good ones. And yeah, I crunched tons of numbers. Like every day I would, things would change, the difficulty in the Bitcoin price side, and I would keep crunching numbers. As we got closer and closer, I got more and more nervous. But things seemed to work out thanks to the Bitcoin gods and the $800 Bitcoin. But
so the price of Bitcoin currently has really impacted your bottom line, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
And, you made the decision to buy this equipment. And if you don't mind talking about it, how much of an investment did you make in the Bitcoin mining hardware?
Each KNC Jupiter was about $7,000, $7,100 with the Saturn to Jupiter upgrade. I had to pay a little more, on the upgrade side. I had to buy a new modem, new wiring, PSUs, did the 1,000-watt PSUs, 2 of those. So those were 150 some each. All in all, I probably put about $15,000-ish into this. And yeah, it seems to be, I've seemed to have got a return. So.
Okay, so you put $15,000 in around June, and then now that you received the miners, when did you actually receive the items?
Actually, on October 14th, I was a day 2 Jupiter owner, and then I ordered another one, and I got that one on October 17th. So October 14th and 17th.
Yeah, so that's pretty close together. Mm-hmm. So at this point now, you've been mining for a little over a month, is that right?
Correct.
Yep. Okay. So we're recording this on November 26th, just for anybody who's wanting to think about that. So you've been mining for a little over a month, and with whatever difficulty was going on at that time, and also with the current Bitcoin price, you say that you've made back your investment already.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I know KNC Miner was nervous about that because I talked to Sam Cole, one of the principals over there at KNC at the Inside Bitcoins conference in New York in July. And he said, we really want our customers to make back their investment, basically. Like, we want this to be profitable for people, and we're going to do everything we can to help that happen. And it sounds like it has worked out, but there was also a factor in there that they couldn't control, which was the Bitcoin price.
Yes, and the difficulty, of course.
It seemed like they had a little influence over the difficulty because their machines were actually contributing to it quite a bit, right? Like, there are no other companies who have single units that are as fast as theirs and that are shipping them. It's interesting because people crunch all these numbers and they think, well, is it going to be profitable or not to mine? It's kind of a thin margin, right? But then something like this can happen where there's a meteoric rise in the price of Bitcoin, and then all those calculations kind of go out the window, or they really need to be adjusted because nobody would have predicted the price of Bitcoin was going to rise like 7 or 8 times. That's interesting. So tell me about how you felt when the miners arrived on your doorstep.
Oh, well, of course, I was tracking them and watching out the window every second. Where is the UPS man? So, and even when he came, I was ready. Like, I had everything in my mind and on my computer all set up. Of course, I didn't really have to have much on my computer set up. The KNCs came pretty well ready. You just plug them in and play, and maybe apply some firmware. And that was pretty much it. I mean, it was really simple. What
software did you use to do the mining? Did it come with them?
It came with a built-in CG miner. It was very well made, although the packing could have been a little better. I think some folks' machines got kicked around during shipping and came over a little jumbled up with a lot of hardware errors for some folks.
But yours were okay.
One is golden. The second one, is a little handicapped, but not too bad. Can't complain that much.
And what kind of hashing speeds are you getting with both of these machines?
Well, when I first got it, it was around 550, and then with firmware updates, probably around 565, and then the second one...
Gigahashes per second, right?
Exactly, gigahashes.
Okay.
And then the second one around 505, and then with firmware updates, it kind of went up to like 535.
So the firmware really matters in terms of the speed.
Yeah, it seemed to correct a few timing issues.
Now, had you done any mining before this, or was this your first experience with Bitcoin mining?
Well, yeah, I did do so back in April, some mining on my iMac and MacBook Pro, which was pretty minuscule, just for fun. And I got some USB sticks, which was just for fun, more or less. Nothing really profitable there. But
you talking about the block eruptors?
Yeah, the block eruptors, exactly.
Okay, so those were, if I recall correctly, about 300 megahashes per second. So those are 1,000 times. No, not 1,000 times. Help me out here. How much slower are those?
Oh, well, 300 megahashes. So it takes about 3 of them to get 1 gigahash, which was when they first came out. It was like, oh, wow, look at this. And then all of a sudden difficulty went boom. And then everybody kind of got, nothing really out of them.
So those are 1,000 times slower than the Jupyter machines.
Oh, yeah, much, much, much slower.
They must be fun to play with, I gotta admit.
Yeah,
but
they are pretty cool, like a novelty.
You had done a little bit of mining before, but just for fun. And now, would you call yourself... Do you think that you could make a living as a miner? Obviously, you still have a day job, right?
Yeah, I'm a pharmacist by day. But, I've been thinking about it. KNC's coming out with another one. I don't know if that's...
I just saw that today, yeah.
So, and I don't want to put out any bad press, but unless Bitcoin price keeps going up, I don't know. I'm just kind of skeptical on this one. So I don't think I could make a living unless I was in it earlier, I think, unless I was buying other companies' products, because other things are coming out between now and KNC's next release. So you have to keep on buying. I think it gets to a point for the personal individual, you got to make a decision to put the brakes on, because you can get in over your head and all of a sudden just have a house full of mining equipment and have the air conditioning bill through the roof. So.
Okay, so you're running these out of your home. I know some people run them at work and get basically, quote, free electricity, which is really their employer's paying for it. Or or maybe they run it from a college campus or something where there's somebody else is paying the electricity bill. Right. Is the cost of electricity a factor? Is it how significant is that?
Well, I'm estimating my electric bill will probably be around $200 a month or maybe $250. And considering Bitcoin prices at the moment, and the hashing power, that's really insignificant. I mean, I make that back in less than a day. So
wow,
I'm not really too worried about that part. I am curious about what it's going to be. I haven't received my first bill yet. It should be coming any day now. Electric company's probably wondering what I'm doing. So
yeah, well, I guess that could be a concern because it's not out of this world. And a lot of people who are into Bitcoin are, some might say, paranoid libertarian types, but it's not paranoia if you're right?
Yeah, exactly.
But some people, it's not out of this world to think that the cops might see a high electric bill and think, oh, is this person having a grow op or something like that?
Yeah. Another point I'd like to bring up is the taxes. I actually called my CPA today. She didn't have any clue what I was talking about. I called her up and I said, have you ever heard of Bitcoin? And she's like, what? So I just said, Google it. I wasn't trying to, I kind of used the analogy of digging for gold in your backyard and selling it. So that's something that I'm really, really worried about, is just selling on the exchanges and then, the bank's going, what are you doing? So I'm really taking a serious effort in keeping my papers and books all straight. I have an Excel file all set out with what I spent on mining and what I'm selling, and trying to keep it all straight and on the up and up, because an honest man has nothing to hide.
It's hard to know because you don't know what the rules are or what you're going to be expected to report on taxes or whatever from mining. And this is all kind of a new area. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out. I mean, I've seen some ideas of, what to do about Bitcoin taxes, but it could be different for miners. I mean, or it could be, who knows? I mean,
it's kind of weird because Bitcoins are already there. We're just getting them. We're just going to get them. I mean, it's not like we're creating them. They're already created, but they're not solved, so to speak. It's like, it is a real gray area. So I'm just keeping the books right, going to be on the honest, on the up and up, and we'll see what happens. And I just want to give my CPA a heads up now because
she's got a couple months to research it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I wonder, because sometimes it can be such a thin margin on mining Bitcoins that I wonder if the taxes could make or break some people if they're going to pay taxes on the Bitcoins that they mined. Could that put some people at a loss or whatever? I'm curious about that.
I think that if you have a small operation, it's not going to be a big deal because I'm using Coinbase, so know your customer rules and everything. So if the information needed to be got, I'm sure the powers that be could get it. I just want to be as transparent as possible with that regards. But with the Bitcoins that I'm mining and the Bitcoin price, it's hard to hide what you're making. So,
well, it's hard to hide it if you're selling it, right? But if you're not selling them, if you're just holding on to the Bitcoins, then it doesn't seem like it would be too hard to hide, right?
Well,
and
true.
if you're not selling it, you're not realizing any capital gains.
True. I don't think if you're holding the Bitcoin, I don't really think you need to report anything. I think it's when you sell on the exchange, when you actually make a public transaction, I think that's when you really need to be careful.
I'm curious if you plan, if the difficulty goes way up, let's say KNC Miner comes out with a new product or some other company comes out of the woodwork and just makes a new product that's really, really fast. And the difficulty goes way up and it's no longer profitable in a couple months, let's say, aside from heating your house. It's spring, it's starting to warm up. You don't need to heat your house anymore. And it's no longer profitable. It's costing you more electricity than you're making in Bitcoin. Are you still going to keep running those machines, or do you think you're going to turn them off?
That's something that I've thought about, and that's something that I really don't know. Until I get to that point, I'll probably make a decision. But I'm thinking I'm probably going to run them for a little bit. But if I'm only making 0.1 coins a day, I think I might still do it because in 10 days I can get a Bitcoin. If it gets down to below 0.1 a day, I think I might have to turn them off. I mean, unless
below 0.1, that's like $100 right now.
I know, exactly. So that's what I'm saying.
So if you're not making $100 a day, it's not worth it.
If I'm not paying the electric bill, I guess it's not worth it. Because at that point it's going to be warm out. I have to run the AC a little more. So you have to weigh all these factors. You're asking beyond profitability.
Actually, I do know people who have the strategy of, I just got my 5 gigahash per second miner from Butterfly Labs a few weeks ago. Even though it's not really generating a lot of coin, it's maybe making 0.01 or 0.0 something per day. Yeah. I'm still going to run it because I'm going to just hold that Bitcoin until it goes up and then able to make my money back or whatever.
I'll probably do that, to a degree. Maybe until 2016 when the 25 per block goes to 12.5. That could be another thing. So, but I have some Butterfly Labs things too. I actually just got my last one in the mail yesterday.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I'm running those.
So that's going to add a drop in the bucket to your
drop in the bucket. I think $5 a day.
But $5 a day invested in Bitcoin could be $500 a day in a couple of years.
I know,
you never know.
Really, it's so unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen.
EasyDNS is the Swiss Army knife for your domain names, helping meet their customers' individual needs since 1998. EasyDNS has been an outspoken critic of SOPA and CISPA. EasyDNS was an early supporter of Bitcoin, and now they are proud to sponsor this show. Do business with a company that shares your values. Get a 13% discount when you pay with Bitcoin. Go to bitcoin.easydns.com and be sure to use discount code LTB.
Hi, this is Jason King, founder at Sean's Outpost, and you are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. Sean's Outpost is a homeless outreach in Pensacola, Florida, and we are proudly powered by Bitcoin. To date, over 13,000 meals have been fed to the homeless in our area, all purchased with Bitcoin and through the generosity of the cryptocurrency community. Read more about us at SEANSOutpost.com. Food, shelter, Bitcoin, everybody. Sean'sOutpost.com.
where do you see mining or Bitcoin mining going in the future? Like, do you have any ideas?
I do have an idea in the far future. In the near future, I don't think anybody really knows. Like within the next year, difficulty is probably going to level out. It's going to plateau. We had a big hockey stick rise, and it'll even out. I think after February. We have a little evening out right now. It's kind of leveling off, but I think it's going to spike up again with a couple other companies releasing, and then maybe level off again in the spring, and then KNC again, and it's just kind of like a little game they play. But I think after about 2040, I think at that point it's going to be so hard to mine. Assuming we get to that point and everything's good, and Bitcoin's thriving and everything, I think everybody will be mining at that point, because people really won't be making tons of money on Bitcoin mining at that point, because there won't be any more coins to get. At that point, we'll just be verifying transactions.
And the transaction fees would go to the miners, but yeah, that's minuscule compared to...
It'll be minuscule, and I think everybody will have a Bitcoin miner in their kitchen at that point. Who knows what's going to happen, but I think that it'll be so mainstream at that point that everybody will have some sort of Bitcoin miner in their lives, running in the background on such a level, like a 1 nanometer chip, in their phone or whatever.
So that would be the ultimate in sort of decentralization if everybody had a little chips in their phones and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I could see some kind of technology that gets built into just devices. Like Andreas likes to say, you could mine with your light bulbs or whatever, but just some kind of technology that takes unused or idle time on electronic devices and turns it into mining power somehow. Mm-hmm. I think that would be really cool. If Bitcoin is still around at that point, maybe we'll be mining some other coin or something else.
Yeah. With that in mind, I thought about pointing these miners at altcoins.
Oh yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Tell me more about that.
Well, there's a PP coin, and there's a few other SHA 256 coins out there that I could mine probably solo on a pretty good basis. And the prices of those have been going up as well. It's really amazing. And scary at the same time, but
why is it scary?
I don't, because they just go up so fast, and I just don't know what to expect in the future from these things. Are they gonna crash and then come back up, just kind of like Bitcoin did? There's going to be a crash, and are they going to go back? Who knows? It's just so unpredictable. To be specific, PP coin, I think, is around $2 to $4 right now. Nova coin went up to like 17.
Yeah.
And Litecoin's up to 14. Of course, you can't mine that with the KNCs. I know Litecoin's a crypt basis, so I would have to get Bitcoins and buy Litecoins. As far as mining goes, I really don't know. I haven't really researched into which altcoins to mine. I think I would just point them at the one that's most profitable at the moment. So when the spring...
And how easy is it to do that? Like if you get a device that's set up to mine Bitcoins, how easy is it to make it mine PP coins or Terra coins or some other coin instead?
It's pretty simple, actually. If you're using a pool, you just change the miner configuration for the KNCs. You can just change the line inside in the password and just point it to your pool. To solo mine, you would just point it at your Qt client. Of course, there's some other things you have to do there to get that set up, but it's really not that difficult.
Have you done it?
I have done it, but I haven't gotten any coins from it. I point.
So you tried solo mining?
I did try solo with my USB block eruptors for about 2 weeks, and I got nothing.
Even with an altcoin that's relatively way less well-known or way less popular than Bitcoin, if you're using something like a block eruptor that gets a pretty decent speed, I guess, maybe for the time, you still can't get a block solo mining.
Well, I calculated it out. I have 9 USB sticks, so that's about 3 giga.
Wow.
Yeah, that's about 3 gigahashes. And
serious.
Yeah. So, when I did the calculations, it's about 120-ish days or so, or 160 days, I can't remember, to get a block. On average. And of course, luck is a factor. I ran them for 20 days or so, and I wasn't getting anything. And that got me worried to am I doing this right? I guess there's a way you can test it. You can I didn't do that, though. I didn't test the Qt client like a what if scenario. Is it working? So I wasn't getting anything. I was worried it wasn't working right. So that also makes me worry about, solo mining on these KNCs, that, whether I'm doing it right or not. So I think I would have to consult someone in person, like a meetup or something, to make sure that, I have all the variables ironed out. And, I think I could do it. I'm just afraid that if I point them to the, solo mining, I have to wait like 30 days or so or whatever it is to really see if it's working. It's just scary. It's a scary endeavor.
I'm hearing there's a little bit of unknown about whether the setup is correct, but also there's an opportunity cost, right? Because you could be using them to mine Bitcoin, which and you can do, and it's straightforward, right?
Right, on the pools. Mm-hmm.
Do you ever look at the profitability ratios on some of the mining pools? Like some of them actually have a display that says, okay, it's 2 times as profitable to just mine PP coins instead of mining Bitcoins and then trade the PP coins for Bitcoins.
Yeah, there are sites out there that do a little calculation for you. Right now, Bitcoin is just off the charts profitable. There's no way. I mean, since the rise, other coins are not nearly as profitable. So, I mean, just get Bitcoins and buy the other coins to trade them on the exchanges. But before the rise, when Bitcoin was like around 120, like some days PP coin would be more profitable, and then there was like a point where Zeta coin was more profitable. There were a couple of days where I did mine some Zeta coins and just for fun. And
then did you trade them for Bitcoins?
They're just still sitting in my pool.
Okay, so you hung on to them.
Yeah. I didn't even pull them out of the pool. I don't even have a Qt client for those. I'm just, they're
right. Where are you going to put them?
I know. I don't know what to do with them. It's just fun, just fun to mine. I love it.
It sounds like fun. Thank you so much for talking about this. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
For people that are wanting to get into mining, I don't think it's really a good point right now. I mean, this is my opinion, of course. I think that if you're going to get into mining, you have to really speculate on a rise of Bitcoin price. So difficulty is definitely going to go up. It's going to get harder. And with all these new companies coming out, you have to have your foot in the door months ago. If you're going to get in right now, it's really, really difficult. I think the people that are mining already, like myself and other people with other companies with their foot in the door for January, February, actually December, is, a lot of people are going to ship. You got to have your foot in the door. If you want to get into Bitcoin, just buy the Bitcoin.
Okay, one last question about that, actually. If you had taken the amount of fiat, basically, that you spent on the mining hardware and invested it into Bitcoin, would you be doing better now than if you had just bought the mining stuff?
I would be doing astronomically better.
Okay. Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. But it wouldn't be so much fun, right?
Right, exactly. And you can't, have a nice story to tell.
Thank you so much once again. This was great to talk with you, Joe. And now back to the show.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks for listening to episode 63 of Let's Talk Bitcoin. The Future of Money with Jeffrey Tucker was produced by Adam B. Levine, edited by Matthew Zipkin, and featured Jeffrey Tucker and Adam B. Levine. Beggars Can Be Choosers was written by The Bitcoin Monger, produced and edited by Adam B. Levine, and featured David Menez. Joe the Miner was produced by Stephanie Murphy, edited by Adam B. Levine, and featured Joe the Miner and Stephanie Murphy. Music was provided by Jared Rubens. Questions or comments? Email Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com. Have a good one.